Chairman Peterson, Vice Chair Thomas, Ranking Member Humphrey, and members of the committee. My name is Mike Mowry. I'm from Ashland, Ohio, House District 67. My remarks today are intended to refute the false claim by many that oppose the call for an Article 5 convention that the Constitutional Convention of 1787 was a runaway convention. Some opponents make claim that an Article 5 convention held today would run away like the last Article 5 convention. This is wrong in two regards. First, there has never been an Article 5 convention for proposing amendments. The Constitutional Convention of 1787 was not convened under the auspices of the Articles of Confederation. The word convention does not even appear in the Articles of Confederation. An Article 5 convention, however, is prescribed and structured in our current U.S. Constitution. Second, the authority to propose our Constitution to Convention of 1787 was largely within the scope of the broad commissions granted by most state legislatures to their commissioners. The demise of the Confederation was widely expected, even welcomed by many prior to the convention. These included members of the Confederation Congress when Congress recommended that a convention be held. See Congress's resolution and Madison's journal entry that day in the attached summary. The time allotted for this testimony, which is an analysis of 12 years of history, does not allow for anything other than a short verbal outline of the topic. So I've attached to this written testimony a summary with hyperlinks to the source material. Included with the attachments are scholarly peer-reviewed articles by Dr. Michael Farris and Professor Robert Nadelson, which you heard reference to earlier. Dr. Farris's article is regarding the Convention of 1787, and Professor Nadelson's is regarding conventions of the founding era. You also find in the attachments full copies of the calls to the convention by each of the states that sent commissioners to the convention, as well as a copy of the Articles of Confederation. It's important for any review of why the Confederation was failing and why there was a desperate need for reform to understand the context of why many, if not most, of the participants in the political system of the day deemed that reform was needed, but not possible within the limitations that constrained the Confederation Congress. This context is important as an assertion is often made that a convention for proposing amendments cannot be safely held in our current times of turmoil as it was during the calm times after the war when the Convention of 1787 was conducted. This assertion is faulty in two regards. First, it can be noted that the Convention Clause of Article 5 in our current Constitution was specifically included with expectation it would be utilized during difficult times when an intransigent national government resisted the will of the people. Second, the Convention of 1787 was conducted during anything but calm times. The states in the Confederacy were far from untroubled. These troubles spanned from the early days of the Confederation in June of 1783, when Congress was chased out of Philadelphia by segments of their own army, right up to the tax rebellions culminating in the infamous and deadly Shays Rebellion, where rebelling farmers and veterans received volleys of grape shot from the cannon of hired militia just months prior to the convention. Attempts to reform the Articles of Confederation were attempted as late as August of 1786, after the Annapolis Convention, with 7 amendments proposed by Charles Dickinson. A vote on these proposed amendments was not even taken due to the belief that they could not be passed. It is in the context of this environment that 12 of the states recognized the need to call on the Confederation Congress to recommend that a convention be held to reform the structure of the national government. Points refuting the myth of the runaway. The Convention of 1787 was not a runaway convention. This suggestion is a slander on our founding fathers, the implication they were either incompetent or duplicitous in the conduct and outcome of the convention. The Convention of 1787 was not constrained by the Articles of Confederation, which was in part the point for calling the convention, to effect reforms that could not be achieved by Congress. The original suggestion of the Grand Convention of 1787 was made by delegates at the Annapolis Convention of 1786 in recognition that broad powers outside the means of Congress were needed to cure the defects of their present frame of government. The Annapolis resolution proposed that among the powers granted, the commissioners of the subsequent convention would be discussing all such alterations and further provisions as being necessary to render the federal Constitution adequate to the exigencies of the Union. The Convention of 1787 was not a runaway. This is evidenced by the broad language of the resolutions by at least 10 of the 12 state legislatures. Excerpts and complete copies of these can be found in the attachments to this testimony. 10 of the state resolutions largely copied the broad scope suggested by the Annapolis resolution. Contemporaneous correspondence, which is included in the attachments of political leaders and participants prior to the start of the convention in May 25th of 1787, clearly show it was expected that the commissioners at the convention would have broad powers. A sampling of the correspondence, which is included in the attachments prior to the commencement of the convention, are things such as Madison to Jefferson in August of 1786. Many gentlemen, both within and without Congress, wished to make this meeting subservient to a plenipotentiary convention for amending the Confederation. Madison to Jefferson, December 4th, from the Virginia State Legislature. The recommendation for the meeting at Annapolis of a plenipotentiary convention in Philadelphia in May next has been well received in the assembly here. I won't read the rest of the citations. You could read those in your attachments. The Virginians, who were the first state to make a call to convention, clearly expected the commissioners to have broad powers to replace the Articles of Confederation. They basically showed up, and on the second or third day of the convention, they already had the Virginia plan in place, and Charles Pinckney of South Carolina also had the Pinckney plan, both of which were strong nationalist plans that could only replace the Articles of Confederation. The outline of the Virginia plan was fully laid out to George Washington in a letter from Madison on April 16th, a month prior to the convention. In closing, I'd say it can be observed in most of the records of the state ratifying conventions, the general sense was not the commissioners did not exceeded their authority and was not a runaway convention. The framers delivered the possibility of a needed reform that was not attainable by other means. While there were minor amounts of grousing by some anti-federalists about the commissioners exceeding their authority, it was recognized by most people that what Washington described as temporizing application would have been inadequate to prevent the disintegration of the Federation and allow the means to integrate the states into a lasting republic. This acceptance, I think, was not just because of the needed elimination of the inadequacies of the Articles as a functioning central government, stipulation that ratification be by the people within the states, making it truly a constitution of we the people.